Hello and welcome everybody. Today we are going to continue working on the Max Lange attack, one of the famous and very sharp opening line of the two knights defense. So after e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4 and knight f6, white is challenging black center after d2, d4. And after the best e takes d4, instead of pushing pawn immediately after e4, e5, or to play the Murphy attack after knight g5, white chooses most classical natural continuation, short castling. And black moves his bishop immediately to c5, which pointer us to the Max Lange attack, when black is trying to keep the strong center and don't counter-attack with the center, even in the price to destroy, completely ruins its king side. So the critical line of this opening is e4, e5. So white is intending black's knight on f6 immediately, when black forced to answer d7, d5, counter-attacking the bishop on c4. So white is necessary for white here to capture black's knight on f6. And after d takes c4, rook e1 check, trying immediately to attack black's king, which is still situated in the center. And we saw last time that move king f8 extremely dangerous, leads to the losing position, or very difficult position for black, when bishop e6 is much better continuation. So black is continued developing pieces, ready to move the queen out and then to move long castling, creating this very strong pressure over white's position, because white lost its center pawns completely. Look, and black's great is c4 and d4 pawns. If black reach in endgame, white's position is completely catastrophe. So that's why we have to be very aggressive and to play in the attacking mood. Knight g5, queen d5, only answer which we started to analyze last week. After knight c3, also this tactical maneuver we know already from the previous lesson, black cannot capture the knight because queen takes d5. Don't forget the bishop on e6 is still pinned. Black's only answer in this position is queen f5. And I showed you that in the early games here, Stenitz played f take g7 and g4, but today's theory recommends to play knight c3 to e4. And this line was analyzed by Russian greatest chess player, father of Russian chess, Mikhail Chigorin. And the first game we are going to study today is Mikhail Chigorin against Adolf Albert, which was played in Berlin 1897, more than 100 years ago. So Adolf Albin decided here to play long castling. So Adolf Albin, of course, well known, author of the Albin's counter gambit, which we already studied a bit. After long castling and g4, this is the main point of white's play in that line. So white is attacking black's queen, trying to destroy the connection between the queen and the bishop. So black cannot capture. So after takes and bishop takes, It's not so difficult to win. Also, white can capture immediately on c5. Possible to capture on g7 first. In any case, white's position is win. So black definitely cannot capture the pawn on g4. But where to go? Queen d5. That move played in the game. And later analysis says that Queen d5 move probably is losing the game when the best continuation will look later. Why Queen d5 looks so natural? This move is losing the game. Because after f takes g7, rook g8, knight f6, and queen d6, black were planning to sacrifice the exchange after knight take g8 and rook take g8, and exposed position of white's king side will be enough compensation for the sacrificed exchange. So look, white's king is completely open. So black is playing to capture rook on rook g7. Indeed, that is the point, that white is not forced to capture on g8. And I guess this was already home analysis from Mikhail Chigorian. He played knight g to e8. This is a key move which completely ruins black's position. It's so impressive to see how white's pieces have penetrated the enemy position. The white's knight are posed on dominated squares, and upon close inspection, black's queen turns out to have hardly any move. Clearly that queen e7 cannot be recommended anymore. After knight takes, rook takes, and bishop g5, white is winning immediately. The c5 bishop is a next sacrifice. So what else? Queen e5 will be met by f4, which is allowing discovering check after d3, but Chigorin, I believe, prepares this line at home, so he advances his f pawn and completely destroys black's harmony. Black's queen is trapped in the center of the board. Look at that. After d3 check, king g2, and queen d4, white simply plays c3 and the swan song for the black's queen. It's unbelievable, but black has to resign. Look, black's queen has no move. Trapped in the center of the board. So it's easy to understand that after d3 and king g2, black also cannot capture the pawn. After d takes c2, white is playing queen takes d8, intermediate move with a check. And after king takes d8, f takes e5, just keeping the full rook up for white. So after queen d4 and c3, Albin immediately resigns. So you see how difficult black's position, how dangerous everything here in this Max Lange attack. So you have to be very good prepared for these sharp lines. So later analysis in this position showed that after queen e5, probably black cannot save the position anymore. So it means that we have to look for better continuation already here after g4, and only a few years later the best move was discovered, and this move is queen e5. It looks very unclear how possible to keep the queen on the same file with the rook, but suddenly the variation shows that position is very complicated and very unclear. Why? Because white is having some lack in development, and after queen goes to e5, so now f takes g7, rook g8, white is not reaching f6 square. Marshall against Capablanca played in this situation a few times, capture in e6 and play bishop h6, and still keeping better position for white. But still it's a bit complicated, since white's king side is also completely destroyed. So king is opened, and if black is going to sacrifice the material ones, that this could bring a lot of troubles on the king side for white. Another try in this position is not to capture on g7, but to play knight f3, trying to follow the idea of Chigorin. But after knight f3 and queen d5, f take g7 and rook g8, knight f6 and queen d6, the position is very complicated. So white has no knight g5 e4 like in the previous analysis, like in the previous game. So after knight takes g8 and rook takes g8, black is having two bishops. Threats bishop take g4, threats rook take g7. Black is having very good compensation. So that's why, let's say, if white wants in this position already, we can just go for the perpetual to play knight f6, and after queen d6, knight e4, just repeating moves, and black cannot escape from it. After queen e7, bishop g5. So already we know that from the main line, black hardly can't escape from the perpetual moves. So from the drawish result. But white could try, of course, playing for more. So that's the game between Mikhail Chigorin and Adolf Albin from Berlin, 1897. Indeed, after knight e4, black is having another interesting attempt. So after knight e4, black can play bishop b6. Let's look at this position once more. So not going for long castling, but to play bishop b6 and keep the bishop protected. So knight takes c5, all the ideas with g4 are not so simple to provide. After f take g7 and rook g8 position is not so simple. Let me 1 second, I just move back the names of the players. First of all, after f take g7 and rook g8, white once again could try to play g4. So black definitely cannot capture on g4. Look, after queen take g4, queen take g4, and bishop take g4, we are coming with discovering check knight f6 at the same time as this is winning move, because white is winning the g8 rook. So queen shall go away, and this looks extremely dangerous for black. Indeed, after queen g6 is not so simple to find the decisive continuation. Let's say after knight takes e6, f takes e6, black is going to win the g pawn on g7, then king is ready to be castled on the long side. How to prevent black from castling? So bishop g5 probably is a continuation. Rook take g7, and now you have to be very careful, because in one game in this position happen the next continuation. Look at that, knight f6. So black's king cannot go to d8, but king f7 is very strong. So white prepared here the tactical trick. So he saw that after queen f3, we are intending knight takes h7. Black cannot capture the bishop on g5. So, but suddenly, surprisingly, black played queen take g5. What's happened here? After knight takes h7, white was already waiting for resignation from his opponent, but instead of resignation, white had to resign after Grady's brilliant answer, queen f5. Look at that. The pawn on g4 is pinned. Suddenly, white, instead of winning winning queen, loses 2 pieces. So after queen takes f5, e takes f5, white is losing another piece and had to resign immediately. So we have to be very, very careful, and after bishop g5 and rook take g7, not to play knight f6 check. What is a better continuation? Queen f3. White is continue to launch the attack on the king side. So knight f6 becomes now very hard to meet. So after rook f7, knight f6 check, probably the best continuation for black is just to sacrifice the exchange, but in that case black definitely cannot pretend on anything more than trying to survive. So, but after king f8 and rook takes e6, white is just developing a very strong attack. So this invasion of the rook decides the game. Black's pieces lack of coordination after king g7. So black is losing also after queen take g5, because check, check, knight take g5, exchange up and extra king side pawns. Not so difficult to finish this technical task. So after rook takes e6 and king g7, white is winning also instantly. How? Knight h5, check. It's no time for capturing, because white has bishop f6 and next recapturing the queen after g takes h5. King h8, rook take g6, rook takes f3 and bishop f6. Rook takes f6, rook takes f6, black has to resign. Game is over. So that once again showing how dangerous black's position in case of bishop b6 even. So it's quite difficult situation for black when you have the king in the center under fire of all white pieces, like in this example. So clearly that's extremely difficult here for black to survive. So it means that best continuation almost in this position is a long castling. So I would like to show you that black was trying to find here some different options how to play in this position. One of the games after knight g5 continued g6. So black is preventing white's queen reaching the h5 square, allowing white to capture on e6, but having idea that after knight takes e6, f takes e6, and rook takes e6, after king f7, black is just getting very nice position. So f6 pawn is gone. Black is completing the development after rook e8. Looks so great, this g6 move. Indeed, after queen f3, queen d7, white can start the immediate assault by rook takes e6, f takes e6, f7 check, king e7, and knight e4. So white is ready to bring the bishop to g5. At the same time, the bishop on c5 is under attack. After queen d5 and bishop g5, black is in completely losing situation. Why? Because after king f8, of course, white can already play bishop h6 and then queen f6, but much more direct continuation is queen f6, intending also queen takes h8 with a checkmate and also bishop h6 with a checkmate. Queen take g5, knight take g5. White is just having extra queen, and of course no big chances to survive in this situation. So let's back from the starting point of what we studied today. e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, knight f6, d4, e takes d4, short castling, and bishop c5. So white today, this position is, I would call it quite rare in the tournament practice, because black is not forced to play bishop c5. So also possible for black to play d6, but the best continuation, of course, knight takes e4. And that line we are going to study in our next lecture. So why this knight takes e4 is so great move? Because black is following the main principle. Main principle says that if there is no direct way for your opponent to win the game, it's always good to capture the center pawns and destroy the center of your opponent. So the point is that after knight takes e4, white cannot win the piece. Never. So after rook e1 and d5, black is having quite great counterplay in the center, and white should look for the other alternatives how to keep the attack. That's why bishop c5, this is a deep water of the Max Lange attack, is not so, I would say, playable today. Because after e4, e5, white is getting so great options for continuous attack, like we saw from the games of William Steinitz and of course Mikhail Chigorin. So what I would like to show you, one more game which was played for that line after rook e1 and bishop e6, knight g5 and queen d5, knight c3 and queen f5, knight e4. So we saw here the move like bishop b6, but the good question, what would happen in case of a bishop f8? So what to play in that case? So in that situation, black already protected its pawn on g7. So f take g7 will be met by bishop take g7, of course. If white plays g4, this leads to the to the very complicated positions as well. After queen g6, let's say knight takes e6, f takes e6, and the possible for white to play something like, let's say, bishop g5. Look at that. Still, for black, if black is going to castle short side, that white is just simply captures on g7 and win exchange after bishop takes d8. At the same time, we are intending to bring the queen to f3 and to continue attack in the center. After f takes e6, the other continuation, of course, is queen f3, but in that case, knight e5 could be playable. So maybe bishop f8 is also deserves some attention. I can't say that black is solving all its problems, but let's say even after f take g7, bishop take g7 and knight c5, white is achieving quite unpleasant initiative. So intending knight takes c6, intending queen f3. Position is very complicated. It's not so simple to solve all the problem at once. So let's say if you are playing this position with black pieces, anyway, I would recommend you to play the classical continuation long castle and to avoid all this bishop f8 and bishop b6 moves. So in that case, if white is making one mistake, that could finish very bad for white as well. And the continuation which we just studied, that after g4 and queen e5, white is playing here simply knight f3. So important to remember, of course, queen e5. Queen e5 is a key move in this position. And as we saw in that lecture, queen d5 is a decisive mistake. And of course, queen g6, same. We cannot leave the c5 bishops anyway. So remember, so this opening line basically very important to remember the lines, because one change of move could be dramatic for the outcome of the whole game. So after queen d5, black is lost. After f take g7 and knight f6, as we saw in the game between Chigorin and Albin. And after queen e5, probably white is not getting any advantage. Sorry, here after queen e5. So f takes g7, rook g8, position is very complicated. And f4 leads to the big problems for white, seems like, after d3 check. King g2 and queen d5. Look at that. So white's king is under threats, and black is also intending to capture on f6. So suddenly it's completely different. So if white plays f take g7 and rook g8, it also doesn't change so much the situation. Once again, after f4, we can play d3 check, and position very interesting, very unclear. If white even tries to play king f1, still after queen d5, it's not possible to move the knight to f6 because black's queen is coming with a decisive checkmate threat. So that's why queen e5 is so much better than queen d5. Remember this move. So today we just work it out, the must known. So this line you must know if you play also with white, also with black, because let's say if you like to play very sharp chess, that bishop c5 could be recommended even now. So this Max Lange attacking line, very interesting opening. And if you like to trap your opening and to surprise him, this is one of the greatest opportunities for you. Thanks everybody for watching. So I would like just to remind you that our next lesson will be based on that open line of the two knights defense. So after knight short castling, we are going to study this knight takes e4, the most classical continuation. So what happens at time? So how white has to meet black in that line after knight takes e4, and what additional brilliant combination we have in this line after knight takes e4. Thanks everybody for watching. So we are going to continue next week, and if you have any question, just immediately send me message on the www.GGuide chesslessons.wordpress.com. Hope you're enjoying my lectures about the gambits and attacking lines. And thanks for watching, and stay with Gambit Guy and ICC. Bye, see you.